I wonder if you're feeling a little uncomfortable right about now. Silence can do that. I bet 1,000 thoughts were racing through your head to fill the gap, to fill the silence, right? When there is silence, people rush to fill it. Silence is uncomfortable for many, but for a coach or counsellor, silence can be a powerful therapeutic tool. Come with me today and let's explore why. Imagine your client looking at you and saying, "Ooh, that's a good question," and then sitting silent while they process and consider their answer. Whenever you get a reaction like that, it confirms that you've asked a powerful question. You asked a question that has made your client pause and think. And that's the whole point of therapy, isn't it? Our clients have the answers deep inside. Our job is to help them search for them and find them and draw them out. It drives me totally nuts when I hear people say that coaching is all about telling others what to do, or that counselling is giving advice. No, just no. That is not what either profession is about. If you are a help professional who thinks that you are there to give advice or tell others what to do, please stop. That is the very worst thing you can do. It's disempowering, which is the exact opposite of what we aim for in coaching and therapy. Our aim is to empower our clients, to lift them up, to help them make the best choices for themselves. Let's think about that for a second. Who knows you the best? You do, of course. Even your partner doesn't know you quite as well as you know yourself. So who knows your client the best? They do. As the saying goes, the client is the expert in their life. In fact, the only person who has lived their experiences is the client themselves. So it makes perfect sense that the only person who truly knows what's best for them is the client themselves, not you, their coach or counsellor. It would be rather arrogant of us to presume to know our clients better than they do themselves, wouldn't it? Our role is one of asking the right questions to help the client draw out from themselves, from inside of themselves, the answers that they need. Imagine if you were to give someone the advice that, well, let's say they needed to leave a partner, and they went ahead and followed your advice, only to find once they were on their own, they realized how much they missed their partner and how much they really did love them and wanted to be with them. And in fact, it was the worst mistake of their life to leave. Who would they blame? You. Now imagine, instead of giving advice, you were able to ask powerful questions that made your client pause and really think about their relationship and what they wanted. What if from your questions your client came to their own conclusion to leave, or in fact stay? It would be their decision. They would own it. So whatever the consequences of that decision, the client owns it. They take responsibility. And that's where true growth and empowerment comes from. When a client owns their decision, then no matter what happens as a result, they're in a position of power over themselves. They can take responsibility for the outcome, which, by the way, means the chances of follow-through and action taking and success are also significantly higher. So make sure that the questions that you ask are powerful questions. Avoid what I call the surface level questions, which really get the client nowhere. What do I mean by this? What do I mean by a surface level question? Well, a surface question is one that is really so obvious to the client, it doesn't help them with their issue. It doesn't help them to move forward. Some examples of surface questions are, how many children do you have? What does your partner do for a living? These are questions that the client already knows. Such questions are much more to satisfy the curiosity of the helper and not designed to help the client move forward at all. Power questions are the ones that get the reaction, oh, I need to think about that. That's a good question. And cause the client to really think. Power questions are ones the client does not immediately know the answer to. Power questions cause the client to dig deep and ponder. Power questions are ones that really move the conversation forward. Power questions will help your client change their state from a negative stance of this is all too hard, it's all too much, to a much more hopeful, resourceful, positive state of possibility thinking, where they are able to come up with ideas on how to change their situation or move forward with the challenge they are facing. Power questions generate positive energy, and it's from this positive energy that real change can happen for your client. I'm not saying it's easy. The change likely will entail some difficult decisions and some difficult actions. But the change that the client wants can only really happen when they dig deep, understand what they need to do, and they own the task. They own the actions. Power questions will usually result in silence. This is why I said at the start, silence is a powerful therapeutic tool for help professionals. You might be thinking, okay, silence is great, but how does it really help? Well, silence serves many purposes. Number one, it gives your client and you time to process a question. What does it really mean? You see, when you ask a really good question, the chances are your client has not been asked that question before. So they're going to need time to process, to think what it even means for them, let alone consider the answer that is right for them. Number two, silence shows respect because it allows them that time to consider their response. Consider the response that is right for them. Silence also gives you time to process the conversation. Maybe even think of some exercises that could help your client further. Only if my client looks uncomfortable in silence and starts fidgeting and breaking eye contact and looking around, that would be a clue that says I need to break the silence. But even then, it can create a learning moment. If your client does start fidgeting and looking around and generally giving the signals that they are not comfortable, you could reflect your observation of their discomfort and open the conversation to exploring what it is that's behind it, what's making them so uncomfortable. If, for example, your client says, well, they really don't have any idea of what to do. They are completely blank. That's why they came to see you. They want you to fix it, which is a common statement from clients. And we do not fix people. People do not need fixing. But if a client does say that they're completely blank, that can be really helpful because it can lead to a brainstorming exercise where together you can identify possible answers. Doesn't matter how wild and wacky. You can think of the options for the client to then make the choice. So if you're not comfortable with silence, I strongly encourage you to get comfortable with it. Treat silence as your friend. Okay, so you get that silence is important. You get that you need to ask powerful questions. But what is a power question? What question can you ask? So let's identify a few power questions. Consider these. How do you want to feel about the situation? Instead of asking the trite and all too oft asked question of how do you feel, which is kind of being so overused, it's meaningless. Instead, ask your client how they want to feel about the situation that they are facing. This can help to shift perspective. For example, if your client is full of worry and panic at the news that they're losing their job and are stuck in negative thinking of all the problems that it causes, ask them, well, how do you want to feel about this? That might help them to start to look for any possible benefits from the situation, which opens the door to finding ways forward. Maybe it's an opportunity to do something that they love, because the reality is they didn't actually like their old job that much anyway. Then you can ask your client, so what would you need to believe to feel that way? This is another great question that helps your client reveal their inner beliefs and thoughts that might be lying under the surface, causing problematic behaviors and creating barriers for them. Then you could ask, what do you need to do to believe that? Asking this again gives your client the chance to start thinking of solutions and actions that can change their situation, that can move them forward. Then a great question to ask, a simple closed question, are you prepared to do that? It's a good old commitment question. So often our clients say they want a situation to change. They might even come up with some ideas as to how they can change. But when it really comes down to it, they're not prepared to do anything to make the change. They kind of just want it to magically happen. Sorry, life is not like that. It's important to reveal this so your client can choose what they really want. It is their choice to make. Sometimes it is much easier for a person to stay in a situation of pain than to do things that are perceived to be more painful to change. For example, it can be comforting to stay with the known, no matter how painful that known is, than to venture into the unknown. A few years ago, I had a client who was struggling with overwhelm and overload and an unresponsive, unsupportive husband. We identified a whole list of things that she could do to move forward, but she didn't take the action. And when we explored and dug deeper, it was because those actions were going to be uncomfortable. She was afraid that they might not work. And so she preferred to remain stuck with what I like to call a cloak of discomfort wrapped around her. There's a degree of comfort that comes from such a cloak. Another example, I had a client who was struggling with the dilemma of whether to leave her husband or stay. He was a man who had showed no interest in her or her life or what was important to her for years. He was totally focused on his career success and wanted much more of a trophy wife to parade business functions than he did a real wife to be mutually supportive and move forward together. For years, my client had chosen to stay because it was much easier than for her to leave, despite the fact that she was deeply unhappy. But that's a story for another time. For now, if you want to explore more power questions, then you'll want to check out this video. Happy questioning. I know you can do it, so why the hell not? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.